Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Game for All podcast here on Eat Sleep Game, part of the Game for All network, of course, our lovely sister channel for all of our video gaming content these days. I am Jordan. This is actually episode 97. You may be wondering, why is it 97 when last week Luke and Sean did episode 95? Well, you may have missed an extra episode in there because me and Jeff from Analog Stick Gaming got together last week
also
to
part
discuss,
of the Game for All network.
Yes, one of our great partners, to discuss Trek to Yomi, which we both reviewed. You can find our written reviews as well, which are linked in our video on the channel. So please go and read those, because mine is at theouterhaven.net, which is a very good site that isn't an official partner of ours, but they do some great work over there. And you know, I'm a little bit of a part of that site now, done a few reviews there, and I'm very proud of them. So please go and check them out. So yeah, this is episode 97. As you have already heard and seen, Luke is with me today. How are you, Luke?
Yeah, bad wrist, which is why I haven't put a video out in a couple of days, but I plan on doing.
We of course have no Sean, because Sean has once again disappeared.
Yeah.
As we say every week, Sean's a very busy man at the moment. He's got a lot going on. I think we will, in maybe a month or two, be back to a bit more regular kind of three-man team. But for now, yeah, Sean is kind of here and there. He obviously is still editing the episodes. That's why they sometimes go out a little bit later at the moment. But, you know, they will always be out. So keep an eye out for them, and obviously, you know, follow us on the social medias to kind of find out when they go out and stuff. That is all helpful and everything for you and for us, really, because the more followers we get, the more eyes we get on this, and the more content we can make for you guys. So please do that. And today we're gonna have a little bit of a skeptical one, Luke. Really, a little bit of speculation we're gonna put in there, and maybe be a bit skeptical about things that might show up and might not show up. Because, of course, there was some big news over the last couple of weeks. There's been a lot of big news, really. We had the Embracer news from last week, which kind of superseded this other news that we're going to talk about today, which was big enough in its own right, really. And that was Xbox and Bethesda announcing their showcase for June the 12th this year, exactly a year after their first showcase together. And yeah, I think it's quite exciting, really, because obviously, you know, people will be looking forward to this one. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Before that, though, have you been playing anything recently?
I've been playing more Link's Awakening. No, not Link's Awakening. I keep doing this. It's a Link to the Past. It's not Link's Awakening. It's very cool. I'm loving it. He's got pink hair. It's wonderful. I played a bit more of the excuse me, the WWE story mode.
Nice. What do you think so far?
Yeah, it's not bad. The voiceover is terrible.
Yeah, the voiceover is bad.
The voiceover is horrendous. My like the main character you play as can't decide if he's Mexican. And
the funny thing is, some of the voiceover, just to be very clear, I am prepared to forgive a little bit, because
it's a wrestling game. They're not actors.
Yeah, and also you can very much tell that some of it was straight up recorded from their houses because of COVID.
Yeah. But like the main character just keeps swapping accents.
But yeah,
at some points he's like Mexican. At some points he's
it's really
like
weird.
An African American dude. Sometimes he's a British guy. It's like, what the fuck is going on?
I have been playing a bit more of WWE 2K as well, so that's interesting that you have. Obviously, you know, we've spoken about that game quite a bit. Very good wrestling game. I think they should be proud of themselves, considering where they were.
I was surprised when they added in like extra stuff to the GM mode and stuff like that.
Yeah, and hopefully all of that stuff continues. that does actually lead me on to a little bit of small news that I wanted to kind of bring up, just because we are wrestling fans, and apparently they're having another video game made, which we may hear about later this year.
There's speculation that it might still be just a mobile game, though.
Yes, yeah. So why don't you explain to people what the game is from what we know so far?
So first off, they're happy with what 2K22 is doing,
which means they're probably keeping the deal with Take-Two.
I reckon 2K. So. I think moving to EA would be a bad idea. I don't think that kind of fits. But yeah, they're happy with the performance. They're happy with the reception so far, because it's been way better than the last one for obvious reasons. But no, this new game that they've talked about is supposedly an RPG of some kind. But they mentioned it in the same breadth as their kind of mobile games doing really well.
Of course.
Which makes me think that it does add to that. If not, it'd be cool if not.
Yeah, it'd be really cool. It could be really interesting.
Yeah, because they've got so many like characters that you could piss about with and do some interesting things with. Like, why have we not got like an old school like side scroller in ages? Like, it'd be such a cool thing to piss about with. I would be publishing all kinds of weird games from them.
There was, and away from WWE, there was of course another bit of wrestling game news this week. For those that are wrestling fans, you probably already know AEW, the main competitor to WWE in Western markets, is making their own game. It's being made by Ukes, who used to make the WWE games, but it sounds like maybe there's a little bit of trouble in those waters over there.
Does it?
Yeah. So apparently, they got the name obviously, which is AEW Fight Forever. But it does sound like Kenny Omega, who's been helping out on the game, has kind of found working with Ukes to be quite difficult. And the game is also apparently quite a way over budget. So it's interesting to see. It sounds like maybe they're having some issues there, and they're having to cut back on certain features. It sounds like.
I think some of the trouble is I don't know if Kenny's ever worked on a game before. I don't know if he's
believe so.
Yeah, I don't believe so. And they're working with the guy who did No Mercy as well, aren't they?
Yes, yeah.
So Ukes are very good at what they do, but he's heading up. He's essentially taking charge of it from AEW's side, and it sounds like he wants a kind of modern No Mercy, and whether or not that's what Ukes want or are going to be good at doing, I don't know. That might be where the pushback is.
Because Ukes have always made very, like, I think I can't remember whether Ukes were involved as far back as No Mercy, but
I will Google.
But certainly from my time of really playing wrestling games, they've always made very different. They're still fairly arcadey, but they were more simulation based than the likes of No Mercy and WrestleMania 2000, you know? So it's
the first one they did was SmackDown in 2002.
Okay, so yeah, they were after the N64 days.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting to see what kind of happens with that game. There have been a few rumors that it is going to come out potentially later this year.
Yeah, they're aiming for September, right?
Yeah, but of course, if there are kind of a couple of development problems and they're having to kind of rework certain things in the game, that could potentially delay their plans for release. If there is, you know, because sometimes if you're cutting back on one feature, you want to then put something else into another place, you know.
I do wonder if some of it is also like they just spent a good 5-6 years under 2K and got kind of used to having to deal with what they did, so it is just kind of feeling out, getting back to what I
guess the thing is Ukes have a certain style of game they make, and to change that style of wrestling game will still take them time. Like, I think people don't give Ukes enough credit because they weren't ever the main name on the box of the wrestling game. It was like people didn't necessarily realize that really the entire game was made by them.
Well, yeah, no, absolutely. And like there's two really prevalent cases that kind of scream that. One, there was like a couple of the THQ guys back in the day were like, oh yeah, when something went wrong, it was us. It wasn't Ukes. Ukes are the ones that like nailed this. If you just let Ukes do what they do, it's fantastic.
And I think they've also always been in it's an interesting time for Ukes because they've always been in a place as well where they have been a bit of a secondary studio, almost making the game, but taking creative direction from the other studio. So, for example, I know in the THQ days, a lot of the creative direction came from THQ. You know, they wrote the stories, they kind of directed certain aspects, but the actual systems of the game were made by Ukes themselves. And I think for them to have to move from almost like a systems-based developer to someone that is more creative as well. Obviously, these people can do it. They're highly talented people.
Yeah.
They know what they're doing. But it is a big change, right? It's
I would imagine that like Kenny is going to be doing a lot of the creative stuff anyway.
Absolutely.
He's a super creative guy. So I honestly wouldn't be surprised. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if sneakily they got Woods in to help as well. Woods for this. Because they're good friends. I honestly wouldn't be surprised.
And also the other thing is, just to be very clear, wrestlers helping out on video games isn't an unknown thing, and they're not always contracted to the company that the game is for either. You know.
Yeah. So, I mean, look at Leo Rush. Leo Rush. He did all the mocap for this last game.
Yeah. So you know, it's like at the end of the day, they get hired by the video game company to help, not.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see where kind of the future of the AEW game is and what WWE do in the future. I am really intrigued by this WWE RPG game if it's not just a mobile game. And that's not to kind of play down mobile games. Some of them
if it's a really good mobile game, then
yeah.
If it's a good mobile game, it'll get ported.
Absolutely.
If it's not,
absolutely.
Then...
But I just think a proper WWE RPG on console and PC could be really interesting.
Just bring back Crush Hour.
Oh my god. That's not something I ever thought I'd hear.
Maybe not.
Oh,
I've been curious for a good while. Like I can't remember. I think I made a list about it a while ago, or mentioned it a while ago, like years now. But like, there's so many interesting and wacky things you could like. Wrestling is stupid. It's dumb,
and they sometimes take themselves too seriously.
Exactly. Like there's so many like interesting kind of things you could do. Like, give me a Guacamelee, but actually with WWE wrestlers or AEW wrestlers or whatever, whoever does it, I don't care. Someone do it. It'll be fun.
Give me a straight up fighting game, like a proper straight. Like I don't know why, but I would love.
Too much point in that because a lot of the mechanics in the latest one do.
That's
feel
true.
A
actually, they changed it more to That's
so I
true.
think that one's probably not worthwhile. Maybe do, like I said, doing a side scroller like brawl 'em up sort of thing.
That would be cool. That would be cool. Like maybe one day that's a video we need to do is something like 10 pitches for WWE video games.
Next time we know for sure that Sean's not going to be around, we'll do that.
Yeah. So there you go.
Sean's not a wrestling fan.
There you have it. Some future content guaranteed for you. Pitches for wrestling video games at some point in the future on this channel.
That'd be fun.
So now, Luke, I feel like we should talk about Xbox and Bethesda because they have this showcase coming up about 5 weeks away at time of recording, which isn't that long. You know,
it's
5 weeks.
And it's about time. We've been waiting for bloody ages to see anything.
I believe this is the first major showcase announced with a date for the kind of summer E3-ish time. I don't think anybody else has announced a showcase date yet.
Just on a quick side note.
Go on.
E3 is dead, right?
E3 in its traditional form is very likely dead at this point.
What E3 is going to become isn't E3. E3 that I always wanted to go to is dead. which is a shame because I never got to go. But
Absolutely. So it's an interesting one, because before we talk about what we expect to be there and stuff, I think it's worth talking about the fact that Xbox had quite a good showcase last year. For those that remember it, I think they were praised. They were praised quite a bit for kind of it. I think the consensus around their showcase last year was it was their strongest one in a number of years. And obviously a massive part of that was they now own Bethesda, right? So they had the announcement of the Starfield release date last year. They had the initial announcement of Redfall last year, which they weirdly kind of left as their one more thing. And maybe that was
a bizarre one.
Maybe that was placed in the wrong place. I think that was one thing. I think that was one thing that people said was their show was good, but
it should have been certain
things in the wrong place.
Outer
Worlds 2.
Yeah, Outer Worlds 2, not Outer Worlds. It should have been Outer Worlds 2. That would have been good.
And they obviously had Forza Horizon 5 that got announced as well and then released a little bit later. Going into this year, though, just purely as a gamer, it feels like this is the year where they actually need the big year, right? Where they actually need... 100%. They need to almost... Sometimes I get the impression with Xbox as a gamer that they are a little bit afraid of showing things too early. And I think they shouldn't be.
No.
Because I think that with all the stuff they have, people just want to see something from it, even if it is early. Even if it's not something that's coming till late next year, people just want to know it exists.
Yeah, I really think this has to be one with some big hitters. And by that, I mean, like, you know, maybe we get a date for Fable. Maybe we get a date for X, Y, Z. I think this needs to be, we're getting solid dates, because I remember vaguely, like, there was a lot of, oh, we've got this cool thing coming, but we don't know when it's coming. I think we need more of a timescale with them.
We need a little bit more of a concrete thing, right? And I think
because we've got
with some games, I think they can get away with that still a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. They're going to announce some brand new things that they're working on, but we need some solid updates on, you know, where all the stuff they've been showing for the last couple of years is.
Absolutely. And that's the other thing, is they're in this weird place. And I've said it for a little while now, where they're in this weird place where they can't afford to show things too early, because then it leads to this speculation of, oh, we haven't seen it for years now, and is it in trouble and all this stuff? And it's like, no, but then they're also in this place where they have to show things early in order to start building that expectation in people's minds.
I think they're primed for being in a place where they can show off stuff for the next 2 years and they're solid. I don't think we've seen enough that hasn't come out yet that should be due in the next 18 months or so.
For sure.
That it should solidly be what the show is about.
And we'll get into that in a minute. I think what we should start with is some of the almost guaranteed stuff, we'll say. Forza Motorsport, which is very likely releasing this year. I don't think they ever changed that date on there.
I'm quite curious with this one. I'm probably not going to play it because it's not my jam, but I'm curious when it launches to see how it does. And
absolutely,
what happens next?
For sure,
I would imagine if it does okay, they might just be like, okay, Horizon's the way forward.
Yeah,
because Horizon
is so big and so popular now, right? That does that become the main series?
That's it. Do they leave like not that, you know, Gran Turismo got amazing reviews or anything, but maybe they leave that side of stuff to Gran Turismo and they just go full hog into,
or maybe they do
like mesh them together, sort of thing.
Or maybe I don't know. Maybe they mash them together. Maybe they do the Gran Turismo thing where with Forza, obviously we haven't had one now for 5 years, but prior to that, they were rotating them between Horizon and Motorsport.
Sure.
So you would get one every 2 years. And maybe it is a case where if Motorsport isn't quite as successful, maybe it's one that we'll only get every 5 years. Do you know what I mean? And then
I
it'll
think
be
it'd
like,
probably be smart to have Forza be one that comes out next year
yeah.
instead of like, because they're still adding to Horizon.
They are still adding to
5?
Horizon 5. Yeah. They've got 2 DLC packs still. There's been some interesting hints that potentially one of the DLCs has a tie-in to Jurassic World, which is
I was going to say, what's the weird one? Because I know there was like Lego and Hot Wheels and stuff. Has there been a weird one like that?
So there are some hints that the developers have been given that it's potentially tied into Jurassic World, and I think that could be really interesting. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see, because they always do a bit of a weird one, of course, and they're usually a lot of fun. People do enjoy them. So
I remember the Fast and Furious one they did. It was the best Fast and Furious game that's
Yeah,
ever been made. Shocking how easy it is when you know what you're doing.
So yeah, we of course do have Forza Motorsport. We likely have Redfall, and there are rumors around that it's potentially going to release the day of the showcase, which would be interesting. I think that, that would be kind of one of those feel-good moments, and people would jump on and play the game.
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't know how interested people are in Redfall. Like, it's completely dead to me. I don't know. There's nothing for me.
But do you know what? I think the thing is, we've seen nothing of it, so people don't know what it is. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. And
true. It's kind of that
could
thing
actually hurt it just dropping randomly.
Of course, but then it could also be one of those things, almost like the Apex Legends style thing, where people see it and immediately want to play it. So it's going to be interesting to see if that rumor is true. But even if it isn't, the original release window for Redfall was summer this year. So the release isn't going to be that far away, you would assume, unless the game's been delayed. And I think that, Arcane have built up enough of a reputation now of doing good games that, it's one they should potentially be fairly confident in terms of gaining some sort of audience. Good game for Game Pass, good exclusive for them. And then, of course, they have their real big one for this year that we know about, and that is Starfield, right? We pretty much know without official confirmation that Starfield is going to be there, because I can't remember exactly who it was, but there was an interview with somebody from Bethesda 3 or 4 months ago where they basically made a comment of they are hoping to show more of Starfield in the summer.
I mean, given it's kind of their tentpole thing this year, I would be very surprised if they didn't see it. Assuming it's, not going to.
I was going to say, the only reason it wouldn't be there is if it's delayed. And even then, it would still be there in some capacity.
I don't think there's any way that it's not going to be there, because regardless, it's their next big old thing.
It is a big one for them, right? Because that's the thing is, although you can say what you want about like Starfield isn't an Xbox developed game in terms of it was being developed before Xbox owned Bethesda, etc. Is a brand new IP that is exclusive to Xbox and PC.
Well, and the first new Bethesda IP
in God knows how long,
like 25 years, something like that.
And so it's a massive, massive moment for Xbox as a whole, because it is a game that will sell the console if it's a good game, right? Like, it's a system selling game. It's it's certainly a Game Pass selling game, I would think. So that's kind of a huge one for them. And I do expect on Starfield specifically, I think they're going to do the Fallout 4 thing where they'll probably spend 15 or 20 minutes and they'll show actual gameplay. And it'll be like Todd Howard kind of talking through the gameplay and certain things you can do, things that are new to the game, etc., etc. I think that would be a smart way to do it. Just because it worked for Fallout 4. that, nobody's really seen anything of the game yet.
Well, I think doubly it probably worked better than Fallout 4 did because it is a brand new
because
thing.
it's a brand new thing. Yeah, that's true.
I just really hope it's not just Fallout or Elder Scrolls in space.
It's an interesting one because I definitely get that thought and that
like
way
if
of
it
thinking.
is, it's fine, but it's like
they could do more, right? It's that feeling.
I think they should do more to differentiate it because I've said it before. Like Elder Scrolls and Fallout are pretty similar, and
in terms of the way you actually interact with the game and play the game.
Yeah, a lot of the structure and stuff like that.
The thing that makes those two different, obviously, are the very different settings.
Yeah.
Which do make a massive difference, of course. But when it's your first brand new IP for 25 years, people are maybe expecting a little bit more than that.
If they can make this not strictly what No Man's Sky envisioned to be, not with like infinite, but like having
make it closer to that.
Have like a more curated version of that where you can actually explore and there's like a good narrative through line, stuff like that.
Do you know one thing I'm really excited to see, because I've always liked the idea of this stuff in the Bethesda games of like building relationships with people and stuff like that. And I'm excited to see, like, is it going to be a case where I can go to a planet, build a relationship with these people on this planet, and then help them against like some other,
I think they have got kind of an inbuilt problem.
Yeah.
It has to be better than Outer Worlds.
Yeah.
Otherwise, people are just be like, well, what is this?
Yeah, and that's the funny thing is like, because obviously there's Outer Worlds 2 coming as well. And also we would assume that Outer Worlds 2 is going to be on a slightly bigger scale because the first game, it wasn't quite a AAA game. Do you know what I mean? It was developed on a medium budget, and it was
it's essentially what the modern AA is. We don't have AA anymore, but it's kind of the equivalent.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like I agree with you, because it's one of those things almost like when Fallout New Vegas came out back in the day, where it was like a lot of people were like, this is a better written game, it's more interesting. Do you know what I mean? There were things that Obsidian did that were noticeably better than the guys over at Bethesda back in the day. And I think, like you said, they have that same problem of, because Outer Worlds was first this time around, it's kind of going to be hard for them to kind of differentiate themselves enough, for one, and also not only that, but prove that they have what it takes, right?
Because, get back to what they were, because like you mentioned in Fallout New Vegas there, when Fallout 3 came out, it was mind-blowing. I adore that game. It's fantastic.
Fallout 3,
but they've I mean, even including Fallout 4, really, they have been on a bit of a downturn. Like, that wasn't as well received as the prior games.
The main thing with Fallout 4 is, it on a technical level, it was the best Fallout game.
Sure.
Actually playing the game was the best. Everything like that, on a technical level, it was the best game. The problem was, I think a lot of people felt like it was basically a Fallout 3 DLC.
I heard that a lot. Yeah. I heard that quite a lot.
And I think that was kind of the problem, is when you spend that many years making a game, people expect a little bit more.
Was it set in the same place?
I don't believe so.
I've only played 3. I haven't played any. I played a little bit of New Vegas.
And it's so I'm kind of with you. Like, they need to get back to their best. I think they will at some point.
I hope so.
I just don't know if Starfield is that game where they will, because obviously, when building a new IP, you are facing different challenges. Do you know what I mean? And there are obviously huge expectations around this game. Like, at the end of the day, it's a Bethesda game, and Bethesda, when they're at the top of their game, are one of the best developers in the world, right? They are one of the best studios in the world, especially for this style of game. So it's going to be really interesting to see what they showcase.
And like, credit where it's due, they are going out there and trying to do have a new IP instead of just being like, oh, we're going to do Fallout, but you're going to go into space this time.
Like they could have quite easily as well. They could have quite easily just done another Elder Scrolls after Fallout 4, and they didn't. Do you know what I mean? And therefore, I think that's really kind of interesting of them. One thing I want to mention after talking about those 3 games there is there has been a report floating around that every studio has submitted something for the showcase. And I just kind of want to dig into that a little bit and give people a little bit of understanding about how these things work. Because while that may very well be true, and I actually believe it probably is true, that every studio has submitted something to show at this showcase, the way in which these things work just means that there's no way every single one of those things will be shown.
They might do like a sizzle reel and like knock through a bunch of them, but
potentially, but it also depends how big these things are, right? So I won't say the game, but one thing I will say is I know that 2 very big things got cut from their showcase last year. And that was just because they chose to hold them back for a future date. It wasn't because they weren't, do you know what I mean? It wasn't because they weren't able to show them. It's just like when you're doing a showcase, one, you don't want something that goes on for 3 hours, because no matter how good it is, no one wants to sit there for 3 hours watching a showcase. You're going to get bored. You're going to kind of tune out. You're not going to pay attention to the things that maybe are really good. So they have to balance things right. And right now, Xbox have so much in their back pocket with the 23 studios who are all working on multiple projects that it's just like, yeah, I believe 100% that every single one of these studios did submit something for this showcase. But I can guarantee you now, unless they are really confident in everything they have, there's no way every single one of these things gets shown.
No, and if they're smart, we've said it a bunch of times, but I think they should be doing, once they start rolling out stuff, I think they're more than in place where they could do a smaller showcase every quarter.
Yeah, because
save some,
because like we've said as well, if you set the expectation around what those smaller shows are, people aren't going to kind of, people never really come out of a direct like, oh, that show shouldn't have happened. At the most, they just kind of come out of it of, oh, that one wasn't for me. And that's okay. Like, not every show needs to be for every person. And I think that's one thing that maybe Xbox don't quite understand yet, where because they focus on maybe this 1 or 2 big shows a year, they try and balance those shows for everybody. And that's the old way of thinking. That's the old way of doing things. And it does still work. But it also means that you run into that thing of people will come out of the show and go, oh, there was only 2 things there I really cared about. Or they'll kind of come out of it and be like, where was this thing? Where was this? And where was this? Because you're holding stuff back for other times.
Yeah.
But if you're holding stuff back and we've seen it with Nintendo. We don't hear about certain things with Nintendo. But every time people go, oh, that will probably show up next time, because they know that next time is coming, right? Whereas with Xbox, and to some degree with PlayStation, because State of Play is also, a random thing at this point in time.
Kind of like Direct. They just kind of pop up when they feel like it.
Yeah, but it's like with Xbox, I think because they're so quiet and because they are playing their cards so close to their chest at the moment in many ways, I think it makes them unpredictable. And it leads to this thing of people worrying when they don't get updates on certain things. For example, when we didn't see Hellblade 2 for about 2 years, what did we all start saying? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, where is it? What's going on?
We all started saying, oh, maybe there's problems. And actually, then we saw it and it still looked pretty promising. And
yeah, it just seems a way out still, a bit
yeah,
out.
yeah. I mean, it's going to be interesting because that's one of the ones that I'm wondering whether it might show up.
Yeah, I thought that as well.
Just because, I also think we don't know the real scope of Hellblade 2. But if we look at Xbox as a whole, the reason I think Hellblade 2 might show up is they positioned it as really the reason you should be buying an Xbox this generation. Do you know what I mean? They positioned it as their tentpole, their kind of new tentpole game, or at least the type of game that they're trying to aim for, right? In terms of, look at Hellblade, this is the type of game we're going to try and give you over this next generation. And excuse me. I just think that we first saw Hellblade in December 2019 was when it was announced alongside the Series X, or the Series X. And then we saw it again, obviously, at the Game Awards most recently, with that little gameplay, like 5-minute thing. And it's like, depending on the scope, it's a weird one because, like you said, Hellblade, based on what we've seen, could be miles out. But if it's a similar in scope to the first game in terms of length of game, like if it's like a 10 to 15 hour game, let's say,
I hope so.
There is no reason it could be much closer than we think. And not knowing the scope of that game is what makes it hard to judge. And I think that Xbox are in a position like that with all of their games right now, almost, where the reason that people are a bit skeptical is because although we know a lot, we still know very little in the grand scheme, right? And I'm wondering if Hellblade will show up just to kind of set that tone.
I feel like it's one that will show up at some point and have a really short kind of release window.
Yeah.
I think it's one they could just be like, sick, it's coming. Here it is.
And I also get the impression
they're really like, no, this is our God of War. This is going to be, groundbreaking.
Well, this is the thing. This is what I was just going to say, because we do get, if you pay attention to Ninja Theory on Twitter, who obviously are developing the game, they do post little updates. Like they'll post in-game shots and stuff like that. They post different assets. So we know that on a graphical level, they're aiming quite high with this game.
I mean, yeah, we've seen that, but it looks remarkable already.
And it's one of those things, like you brought up God of War there, and I do wonder whether not to, because it's not to compare directly, even though people will.
No, but, yeah, it's just that's the level they're aiming for. They're not aiming for that game.
And that's the thing, is like, I do wonder if it's the thing of maybe they are going to take that approach of, we're going to have one massive game a year, and we're going to give each massive game its time to shine. So it's like, will Hellblade show up at this showcase, or will they save it for the Game Awards again? Do you know what I mean? That's kind of the thing. How close it is.
If they're aiming to get it out before December,
yeah. So if it was somehow coming this year, then,
absolutely, yeah.
Because there was, of course, that rumor a little while back, that they do have one game that they haven't kind of dated for this year that is coming out this year, and nobody knows which game it is. No one knows whether it's a completely unannounced game or whether it's a game that's already been announced but hasn't been given a date yet. And obviously, if it is a game that's already been announced but hasn't been given a date, then Hellblade would probably be top candidate for that. Given that we have actually seen gameplay of it, and given that we know that they were working on it since before the pandemic as well, I think that Hellblade would potentially be the top candidate. But the other reason I think that Hellblade will show up, to be honest with you, is Xbox need, in my opinion, they need this showcase to be a sign of intent, right? They need it to be a sign of, yeah, we have actually finally turned the corner. And even if the game isn't coming until, I don't know, April next year, let's say, right? I feel like if it's coming in April next year, but you've got enough of a chunk of gameplay to show, it's worth showing it. Like, just to kind of give people something to look forward to. And I think that in certain cases, that's something Xbox does really well. I think they know how to kind of get people to look forward to certain games really, really well. And then other games they don't handle quite as well. And they don't really know how to sell them to people. And I'm interested to see what the strategy is around something like Hellblade, because it is a very different game than what they've had in the past.
I do wonder.
Go on.
Like, if it's not something to think about, I'd imagine they are thinking about it. But I do wonder if a lot of why we haven't necessarily seen more of it is because we don't actually know when God of War is dropping yet.
That's true.
Because they will want to be very careful and to if not be too close to that.
That's true, because if they are planning on Hellblade coming this year as well, they might be waiting for that God of War date. Before they decide, right?
Because they said they want to do a Sony style game, and that's the most likely one.
Yeah, and for their first Sony style game, they need it to be away from the Sony games, right? They need it to have its own space.
Their most bloody renowned one.
Absolutely. So they need it to have their own, because also, I don't think anybody's going to go into Hellblade 2 and expect the world from it. Do you know what I mean?
No, they'll just expect a bit better than last time, I think.
But people are expecting, almost again, I come back to that thing of they're expecting it to be almost like a signal of intent of show us at least the direction that you're heading in with this style of game.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that this first one is amazing right out the blocks, but just give us some positive signs at least. So what do we think, if we were to kind of just grade it, what do we think the likelihood is of Hellblade 2 showing up in this showcase?
I would probably be surprised if we didn't see it, because we haven't seen it since December.
It was Game Awards last year,
yeah,
where we got that little 5-minute kind of almost cinematic gameplay stuff.
Yeah, given that it's one of their bigger kind of properties that people are looking out for.
Probably their three most. The thing is, their three most anticipated games right now under their umbrella are probably Starfield, Hellblade 2 because of the way they've positioned it, and probably Fable after that because of the legacy of the Fable IP and stuff. Those are probably the big three, right? And I'm kind of with you. Maybe I would be surprised if we didn't at least see it in some capacity. I don't know if we would get like a gameplay blowout or anything, but I wonder whether we could get a proper trailer rather than just like because we've had a CG trailer.
Yeah, give us
we've had a bit of gameplay. I wonder whether they could do
thing,
some sort of story trailer with a release window at the least kind of thing. That would be, I think that would be a good thing for them. Even if it was even if they did turn around and say 2023, do you know what I mean?
I think that's fine.
That would be cool.
I think if it's beyond that, then I'd be a bit worried about it.
Of course, yeah. I wouldn't want to put a date on it if it was beyond that.
Yeah.
But I do think it's a good thing just to keep it in people's minds, because as Luke is evidence of, when you haven't seen a game for a while, you do completely forget that it exists, and there are so many games that it's just hard to keep up. Let's talk about the other big one while we're kind of on it then, and that is Fable. Of course, we've heard that there were potentially some difficulties at the start of the development with that game, and kind of Playground figuring their way into that style of game. But again, that was from a developer who hasn't worked there for 2 years, so who knows where they are right now with it.
Yeah.
What are the chances that we see something else from Fable? Because so far we only had that CG announcement trailer.
Yeah, that was in the first Xbox showcase.
Yes, so that was 2 years ago.
Was it not last year?
No, it was 2 years ago, Fable.
I would hope to fuckery that we see some kind of Fable. Because I'm already skeptical, because of who's making it, because they haven't got experience in that kind of realm.
when they haven't proven themselves in that genre, you're always going to be a little bit skeptical, right?
Exactly.
Regardless of how good they are elsewhere.
Yeah, and especially with what that IP is and what it means. Like it's a massive one, and it's a massive one for me as well. I adore Fable 2.
Yeah.
I hope that we see some of it.
So if we do see it, what do you think we would see?
I don't know.
Because they're not gonna do CG again, right? You wouldn't have thought.
I don't know. I guess it depends how far along and where they're aiming it for. If they're aiming for next year, I'd imagine we get a full proper trailer for it. If they're aiming beyond that, I would imagine it would be some kind of CG update.
Yeah.
Which wouldn't, it's not the worst thing in the world. I don't mind it when they keep
I think there's a decent 50-50 chance of that, because I think that Fable is one of those where it's like it could be aiming for next year, because we have heard, and I mean I've even said it to you as well, just based on information I've had in the past, but from other sources, we have heard 2023 as being the year where Xbox really would kick into gear this generation.
Sure.
So I wonder whether they could have Fable aiming for next year. And if they do, they probably would show it this year, just because it's a massive game.
I got the feeling from the way they revealed that it was coming back that it was still pretty early.
Yeah, absolutely. It felt like it was an announcement of we are working on this, right?
Exactly.
And that's fine. And that's fine to do. But that was also 2 years ago. So when it was 2 years later down the line, you would assume there's been at least some reasonable progress on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I'm with you. I think there's probably a 50-50% chance on that one. But it does lead me to one that I actually think is very likely, and I think probably will hit next year, and that is Avowed. I think I think we'll get Avowed next year. I think there was the report that they were potentially going to show it at the Game Awards. And there was the report even before that they were going to show it in last year's showcase during the summer. And neither of those things happened. But the fact that both of those events were reported to potentially have something from Avowed says to me that it's probably further along than we think it is.
Yeah, I think they probably just went, well, you've told us you're definitely working on Outer Worlds 2. We'll make that one of our bumper things instead.
Yeah. Because you don't want too much from the same studio, right? And it's okay to space things out of
yeah, I mean, I fully think that they could be the kind of Insomniac of the Xbox side of stuff.
Absolutely, they work on so much. They work on so much stuff, and they're also varied in the scope of what they work on. Over Obsidian.
If only I could get a Alpha Protocol remake. That'd be sick.
So I actually think as well, Avowed, if it was coming sooner, say that is maybe their early slot release for next year, because I do think, as I've said in the past, one thing that Xbox need to fix is they need at least one major game in the first half of the year. They've struggled with that the last couple of years, and that's fine when the end of your year is so strong, but you can't always rely on the end of the year being so strong for you, because if something is put close to the end of the year, there's always a chance it could miss, right? There's all like
Yeah.
Halo nearly missed last year, potentially should have missed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Depending on what you think about certain aspects of that game, and it's like, so it's a weird one. Yeah, I'll be interested to see, but I do think that that's one that could even potentially be positioned as, depending on what they had to show from it and how soon it is, that could be potentially positioned as their one more thing. Because
I think it'd be a mistake to do so, because I don't know that, especially with like the other stuff they have.
Yeah,
I think there's a million things they could probably put that would fit better in that. I think that's just a solid,
yeah, and I mean, we'll talk about some of the rumored things in a minute that could potentially go in that slot. Any other games that spring to mind for you that you think might show up, or have a reasonable chance before we get into the rumor aspect?
I would imagine.
What about something like State of Decay 3?
Oh, I don't know. I don't care about that game.
The only reason I bring that one up is because that one was also first announced 2 years ago.
Sure.
But again, we also know that that's a studio that is significantly expanded under Xbox.
There has been a lot of trouble with them as well, though.
And there has been, yeah. So, because I think there was a hands-off approach initially with kind of how that studio was being run, and then from what my understanding is, there was some problems with the leadership there. So Xbox kind of came back in and started to be a little bit more hands-on with their management approach there. So it'll be interesting to see from that one. And this is the thing, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. I think they have so much that it's actually hard to tell, but that's kind of what makes their showcases exciting, but also not really hyped at the same, they're not massively hyped at the same time, because you don't quite know what you're going to get.
It'll take a couple for that to happen. I do wonder if we'll see anything of Perfect Dark. I'm very curious with everything that's gone on there. I'd be surprised if we actually did.
It would be interesting, because if we did, I feel like it would almost be a case of, we're showing you this just to prove to you that it's actually not in a bad place. Do you know what I mean? That would be kind of how it would
even
feel.
If it was just a kind of better idea of what the game's actually going to be, is it still going to be?
I also think that because Microsoft do like the Game Awards now, and they always have at least one major thing there now. They have done for the last few years, and I just wonder whether Perfect Dark could be one of those that they save for that kind of slot, because it's also that kind of audience that watch the Game Awards. You know what I mean? The kind of the more in tune gamer, with no disrespect to anyone, the more kind of almost hardcore gamer, I guess you would call them.
Yeah,
it's like, they're the ones that are really, people did pop for that Perfect Dark announcement of that franchise coming back, and it's like, so maybe you save Perfect Dark for that Game Awards slot, because also the Game Awards always feels like this show as well, where you can show something and it doesn't have to be definitive, like it doesn't have to have a date on it, and it can just be more of almost like an update trailer for the game and give people a little bit more of an idea. I think, they just have so much, right? Across these, we know that, for example, Compulsion Games, who made We Happy Few, they're apparently working on a really interesting game. Like, I've heard I've heard a lot of people who've kind of seen it or heard about it, and they're talking about it very positively. And it's like, well, I wonder if we're finally going to hear from Compulsion Games, because they were picked up in 2018, of course, but nothing has been heard from them since. So
and I'd be very curious what they could do with money behind them, because We Happy Few
had some good ideas, right?
Yeah, and I'm a sucker for BioShock kind of stuff anyway. But it had that kind of vibe, and like it had
absolutely.
some interesting mechanics. And I think with
the execution just wasn't quite there, was it?
Yeah, I think with more money and more stability behind them, it could have been something.
And sometimes, do you know what the funny thing is? Gaming is one of the few things where money genuinely does help the quality of the product. And the reason for that is sometimes the polish or execution just comes from having more staff to do something. But having more staff to do something takes money. And that's why I think a lot of these, we've discussed it before, but a lot of these smaller studios that Xbox did pick up in the kind of 2018 acquisitions that they made, we were all very hopeful on, because they were all studios where we went, oh yeah, these studios with more money are actually very exciting, because we can see how that additional money helps them without even seeing the product.
Yeah, and we haven't really, we obviously saw Psychonauts 2, but that was kind of muddy because they were
because it was halfway through development, so you can't. It's hard to gauge how much impact they had.
Yeah, exactly. But like Ninja Theory is going to be one, like you said, Compulsion
Games.
I forget who else they had.
They had a few others as well.
They had Obsidian was obviously one.
Obsidian was their first big one, really. Like, because Obsidian felt like a big one, right? Because it was a well-known studio.
Obviously, Playground, but Playground's been Xbox for ages. I don't think.
The thing with Playground is they were never owned by Xbox, but they've always been an Xbox exclusive studio. And they're literally since they opened, and therefore they were always associated with Xbox even before they owned them, right? So it was a weird situation there. Kind of Undead Labs was sort of a similar situation, where they obviously did the 2 State of Decay games, which were funded by Xbox, but the studio itself wasn't actually owned by Xbox, and then they picked them up and, rapidly expanded them, it sounds like. Because I think I heard one report that they hired, in like 6 months after being acquired, I think they hired like 50 or 60 people.
Yeah, there was a lot of intake, and they didn't quite know how to deal with it properly, it sounds like.
And they moved to a new office and everything. I think they had a lot going on. But again, longer term for a studio like that, that's really exciting. Because it's like, okay, they are trying to step up in quality and do something interesting. Now I think we should get to a few rumors. And just to be very clear, I know nothing. And this is why we're talking about rumors, because at this moment in time, I have no information whatsoever. So anything I say here are things that are being reported by other people. So yeah, just kind of take it with a grain of salt, as you always would with rumors. But obviously, they're interesting to discuss, and you never know with these showcases what might show up.
Well, firstly, can I just throw in something I don't want to see?
Go on then.
An acquisition.
Yeah, I don't think we will. I don't think we
will either, but I really don't want to see.
I think the only case where that might happen, and that
it's too good to turn down.
So what actually, there's 2 cases. So one, the reason I don't think we will is because of the Activision deal still going through the process.
It was just complicating things.
2, the only case where I think that might happen would be a situation where it's like, if they have a studio that they've worked with a lot before, that are kind of a small single studio. Do you know what I mean? Like a similar kind of...
I'd be okay with that. I mean, I just don't want another...
You don't want like a Ubisoft or a Sega or
I just pump. I keep saying it, pump the brakes.
It's kind of like you said. It's kind of like you said the other week, and we had a big long conversation about it after we actually recorded, right? It's like, there's no problem with acquisitions, but now you need to prove it before it's okay to make more.
Yeah. Otherwise, it is just going to become a negative thing.
Yeah.
Show us,
because if you prove it, then people will be more positive on it, right?
Exactly. Show us why you're doing this. Show us why it's positive. Show us the fruits of all of this.
Absolutely.
And then buy more people.
And that's the funny thing is,
potentially,
as much as we say about gamers some people call gamers hypocrites, but gamers aren't really hypocrites, right? Gamers are just people who want to be, they want to see what the results of things are. And yeah, maybe sometimes that means they kind of are negative around things that are actually positive, but it's because they're negative until they see that they're positive. Like, gaming is a visual medium, right? We see games. People need to see the results in order for them to believe. And I think especially when you are a company like Microsoft and like Xbox that had a really tough generation last time round and lost a lot of faith, it takes a long time to build that faith back up. And it's going to take time. Like, they can say that these acquisitions are going to be great for all they want, and people can even see it and somewhat believe it, but there will still always be that doubt in the back of people's minds of, is it really going to be that good, or are you just buying these people to keep them away from other places?
Yeah, that's it. Proof's in the pudding. Like, we need to actually see it.
Of course.
You need to prove it. Just buying people and giving us your word means very little these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you look at other, and I'm not going to name any names here, but other places that acquire companies, and people maybe do have a bit more trust in them, but even their trust is waning slightly because they say one thing and do another thing. And therefore, people aren't blindly trusting anymore, I don't think, especially when it comes to gaming companies. So, yeah, I'm with you, Luke. I don't want to see an acquisition. I think there are some where if they happened, I'd be like, okay, that does make sense. And like I said, a single studio kind of situation where it was like, if it was a small studio that they worked with before, for example, if they somehow came out and said, yeah, we've acquired Moon Studios, then that would make sense to me.
Yeah.
And that would be okay because that's a studio they've worked with before, is mostly tied to them in terms of their history as well. Why not? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
But yeah, now let's get on to some rumors, because there's been some really interesting things floating around over the last couple of weeks from people like Skolzy on Twitter, Matty Plays. They've all had different information going around. And again, just to be very clear, I know nothing. I'm literally relaying what I'm seeing. So there is a massive rumor that ZeniMax Online Studios' next game is a Mandalorian MMO. And we know that we do know from other reports, I believe Jeff Grubb at one time reported that there is a Mandalorian game in development, but nobody knew who the studio was working on the game. So I wonder whether, because ZeniMax Online, the last we heard from them was an update for Elder Scrolls Online, but they also made a comment of, we are working on a new game and we're excited to share with you what it is in the future. That was last year that they said that. So I wonder whether they could show up this year and maybe the Mandalorian MMO is the thing.
Yeah, it's not what I want from Mando, but
no, of course.
It could.
The other one, which is exciting to me, which I only heard 2 days ago, actually. What I didn't hear, I saw, and I saw a lot of reports flying around about it, and that was the next Doom game potentially getting revealed at this showcase.
I'm kind of more surprised that it's not Wolfenstein.
Yeah, I know.
I feel like we're due a Wolfenstein. Like the first two games.
But then they are tied up with Indiana Jones, right?
I feel like there's been enough time. They could have squeezed a Wolfenstein 3 out.
That's true.
Moving on,
that's true.
Well,
they did Youngblood, didn't they? Which was the spin-off sort of co-op game.
Yeah, and they did the VR one as well, which we don't talk about those because they're just I don't. They're really weird. From
the
the
first two games were great, right?
First two games are fantastic. That second one in particular. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
they're both fantastic, but the second one's incredible. They both are really, really good.
Well, while we're on the subject of machine games, do you think we see anything from them? Like whether it be that Indiana Jones game or
I don't think we see indie. I've been saying it for a while. I feel like we're due a Wolfenstein.
Okay,
It feels because it's been a while since Wolfenstein 2.
Do you know the one thing this makes me think as we've started to discuss these rumors and think of some other studios and stuff is like I think one thing that Xbox will want to avoid and will be smart to avoid is don't let this be the Bethesda show. Do you know what I mean? Because what I'm saying is you've got Starfield, you're potentially going to have a new Doom announced, and you're also going to have Redfall, which is all from Bethesda Studios that you've kind of picked up. If you let Bethesda be the main driving force of your showcase, it will be that thing of people will turn around and be like, well, where are your own games? Where are the ones? Do you know what I mean? And it will create even more doubt around the other Xbox first party studios that aren't Bethesda and kind of what they're doing. So although I want to see what Bethesda has, I also want it to be spaced out, right? And it's like, it can be Bethesda related properties. So for example, there is one report, and we know that there is some evidence to support this one as well, because we know that In Exile are working on a first person shooter game. They've announced that themselves. And well, they're working on a first person shooter in quotation marks. They just announced that was a mechanic in their game, essentially. It's not necessarily an FPS in the traditional sense. And then there has been the rumors floating around that they are working on Fallout remasters of some kind, whether that be 3 in New Vegas. Obviously, some people were assuming that with it being In Exile with the traditional style of game they make, it could have been the first 2 Fallout games. Of course, both In Exile and Obsidian are really interesting studios because they both have people within those studios who worked on the original Fallout games. So it's actually their universe to start with that Bethesda then built on.
I think remaking Fallout games is a bit of an odd one. I think that's a bit of a weird one. Personally. I would probably steer clear of doing that. I
think it depends, right? I think it kind of depends what you're doing. So I think
I think it'd be more interesting if they just made a new Fallout game in that
absolutely. And I know that was one thing that was floating around for a while.
Yes,
was that Xbox basically have told Bethesda that there will be other studios who make Fallout games. And they're not saying that Bethesda can't make Fallout games, but I think they've basically said to them, we don't want to wait for 10 years for another Fallout game.
It's like I said with the WWE games earlier, there are different avenues you could go down.
Yeah. So that's an interesting one. And then, this is the thing. There's always going to be kind of rumors and stuff. I'm expecting, and I don't know why, and this isn't so much about Xbox first party studios, but they always have a section around Game Pass. And for some reason, I am expecting personally a big third party game it will either be a game that has already released on other platforms but is coming to Xbox and will be day one on Game Pass when it reaches Xbox, or it will be a brand new release that's coming up that will be day one. I don't know why. I just feel like they'll have a big third party somewhere.
Because they have been doing it. That's why it's.
And I also think that last year, obviously, the big Game Pass announcement they had, which was big for them and the Xbox ecosystem in general, was when they kind of added all of the Yakuza games to to Game Pass.
Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Don't do that, Luke.
Because where is it?
That. I mean, I feel like that one might never come now. I mean,
I've had that feeling for a while. It's bizarre because it's on PC now.
Well, the most bizarre thing about it, I guess, just to go on a tangent for a minute, Final Fantasy tangent, people, is that it was confirmed as a timed exclusive. Like Square were asked, and they actually said, yes, it's only a timed exclusive.
But did they specify that it would be on Xbox, or does that timed exclusive mean that it was also going to be on PC?
I think this was after it released on PC. So they did. So I believe because there was also, and I don't know whether this came directly from Square or not, but somebody somewhere did confirm an existence of an Xbox version of that game. So I think, because one thing I heard was that it was actually meant to release last year on Xbox. And then the exclusivity contract got extended. I don't know if that's true or not, but that is something that can happen.
Yeah.
You know,
people I mean, with like 16's exclusive to PlayStation as well. So it wouldn't be surprised if they.
Well, the funny thing is, Square. This is the thing, right? And this is something I would have added if I was here last week. Square just sold off their Western arm. They've made a lot of their Japanese-based studios have exclusive deals with PlayStation currently. Their major games that are coming out over the next couple of years are all exclusive to PlayStation in terms of their absolute major releases. To me, one thing about Square selling that Western arm is it's potentially a signal to people who are interested in the Japanese studios of now we are easier for you to buy because you don't have to buy these other studios as well. And
absolutely.
And I just wonder whether Square have always had a better relationship with PlayStation. They have history with PlayStation. It's kind of like the same thing with Bethesda and Xbox, right? Where Bethesda have always had a better relationship with Microsoft. And therefore, I'm not saying Square will be picked up by Sony, but it wouldn't surprise me.
It wouldn't surprise me at this point either.
And it also makes the world of sense. It's like they've got such a good relationship.
Well, and that does, like, to your point, that is kind of what feels like is happening with them selling off the Western stuff. They're getting rid of the stuff that hasn't quite worked.
And it just feels like the management there don't want to be in video games anyway. Like if you the way that they're talking about it in general, they feel a lot like Konami. So yes, I apologize for that tangent, but it was important because Luke brought up Final Fantasy VII. So yeah, in answer to that, I don't think Final Fantasy VII ever comes to Xbox, unfortunately. It would be a lovely surprise if it did, and I think it would throw a spanner in the works of what people think is going to happen over at Square. Because if it does release onto Xbox, you've then got a thing of why would you release this game onto Xbox if you're selling to someone else, right? The game that I think it might be is one that we know they've all been chasing for a while. Like Phil Spencer wants this game more than any other game on Game Pass, and that is, of course, Persona. I think this might be the kind of the big kind of third party, like we've finally got Persona coming to Xbox and it'll be on Game Pass. I could see that happening.
I don't know.
Because they do have such a good relationship with Sega now.
Sure, I think kind of like Sean said it before. If you're interested in playing Persona, you've already played it. Really,
that's true. But then I guess it's one of those things of we could have said that about Yakuza, but the reason they did it with Yakuza was because they wanted to build an audience for that franchise on the platform they hadn't been on before.
Sure.
So I do think there are advantages to doing it, right?
Yeah, I think
it's not always about pleasing the players who maybe they've already played the game because they didn't want to wait. Like sometimes it's about trying to find new players.
I don't know. I kind of almost think that is not going to happen at this point.
Okay,
I think it's just because they've been so vocal about it for so long and it still hasn't happened, sort of thing. I'm not sure that it will necessarily. It'd be cool if it did, but
I do think there's one other.
Just really quick on the Persona thing as well. They sold exceptionally well on PC. Is the other thing.
That's true.
Which makes me think it's not going to happen. Like maybe they come to Xbox, but they don't come to Game Pass.
But then they could also. Yeah, I mean, we have seen games that don't come to Game Pass PC though. So it could, you know what I mean? There have been a few. There have been a few that have kind of only been on Game Pass on one or the other.
It kind of, I think that's less and less these days though, because they want it to be one big kind of
for sure. It'd be interesting to see if that does happen. I think there is one other kind of big third party at this moment in time question mark, and I wonder whether they do get involved in this show in any way, because it wouldn't be illegal. It would just be that they would be involved as a third party, and that would be Activision, because we know that they have Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 coming out this year. That was recently announced as the next Call of Duty game. I don't know what the marketing deals are around Call of Duty, because I think they decide them year on year. Like every year, I think it's kind of, they'll go with whoever.
I thought they had a partnership with Sony for a while.
Yeah, so I'm not exactly sure. But I just wondered whether, like, because it's one of those things where obviously it would be as a third party, but I wonder whether they'd want to do that, or whether that would be like, let's avoid that because we don't want to cause problems.
Yeah. I'd be surprised if it popped up, because I think it would just make things a bit more difficult. And Activision are already difficult enough.
Yeah, because the thing about the Bethesda one, of course, was the Bethesda situation was a little bit different, because one, they weren't on the stock market, right? So it was a private acquisition. But also, before the acquisition even came about, they actually did sign a separate agreement to immediately enter a partnership with Xbox. And that's why their stuff immediately came to Game Pass that they had. Do you know what I mean? So their situation is a bit different, of course. I just wondered, because obviously it is one of those big question marks of, like, we know that these shows have some third-party stuff, and I wonder for Xbox where that third-party stuff might come from, just because Sony have a lot of the Japanese developers tied up at the minute in deals, right? So you're not gonna get many of those. But we also know that Xbox are trying to get a few. There are signs that Sega are starting to kind of side with Xbox. One because obviously their good relationship with Game Pass and stuff over the last couple of years, especially with the Yakuza franchise that was never on the platform before. But also, weirdly, they're pulling Sega games off of PlayStation now, which is a strange one. So it means that potentially they've got some more deals going on with Xbox that mean that they can't be on competing services potentially.
Maybe.
I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued to see where the other stuff comes from, and maybe it is a case of maybe Xbox have already reached that point where they don't actually need the third party stuff to be in their showcase.
I was kind of thinking that. I do wonder Alan Wake 2.
Yeah,
maybe that could pop up.
Well, that could be an interesting one, because I also think obviously Alan Wake 2 will be everywhere, because Xbox gave they literally gave the IP back to the guys over there.
Yeah.
But because of its connection to Xbox and how long it was on Xbox only, I think a marketing deal for Alan Wake 2 would be a really smart one for them to have.
Yeah. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if this is literally just Xbox and Bethesda stuff.
Yeah,
because
that's the thing.
They've got a
like
lot
now that
to
I think about it,
us.
as we've been talking through it, I just think they have so much, right?
Yeah.
Like they have 23 studios. Like one of the reports that I didn't bring up earlier on that I meant to bring up is there is that report of Josh Sawyer, who worked on New Vegas, having a small team that are working on a slightly smaller game over at Obsidian.
Yeah.
That was potentially going to release this year as well. And it's like, I do wonder whether there of course has been that report of every single first party studio submitting something for the showcase. And it's like, actually, if they've got that much stuff, would they even need third party stuff?
No, I mean, I can see them doing their own stuff and some indie stuff.
Yeah.
But
I think the only third party stuff you might get
is if it's a massive get. Yeah.
Are ones where it's either a massive get in terms of a marketing deal, or they already have a prior marketing obligation.
Sure. Yeah.
Kind of thing. Yeah. So it's like, we know
maybe
that go on.
I wonder, not on that because obviously they own them, but I wonder if we get like a Deathloop thing.
Ooh, maybe. That's an interesting one, actually. I'm glad you brought that up, because obviously we know that Deathloop's exclusivity runs out in September. We don't know if the contractual agreement would stop them from showing it as being available eventually on a different platform. You know, is it one of those where they literally won't be able to say that Deathloop is going to be available until like a week before it comes out,
or like,
are they going to be able to show it early?
Yeah, or maybe to the extent where, maybe there's something that ties up and they're not allowed to put it on Game Pass.
Yeah.
Because we know I can't remember which studio it was, but they signed a thing where you can't be on.
I believe it was Capcom with the last Resident Evil game, where
that's right. Yeah.
Their deal to basically be on the PlayStation Store leaked, and in the contract it said something like
it was in the Epic thing, wasn't
it? It said something like they weren't allowed to be on Game Pass for 7 years.
Yeah,
or something ridiculous like that. It was like a ridiculous amount of years.
I don't even think they put a time on it. They just were like, you want to be on the the biggest.
And I
platform.
think we will. And this is the thing, is like, as much as people hate exclusives and stuff, in some ways, exclusives are always going to be around. And I actually think that one thing Game Pass does that we haven't talked about before is it will probably lead to more exclusives in more places, because it will probably lead to Sony tying up games just so they can't go on Game Pass, for example. Because at the end of the day, if you're Sony, right, let's say that, I think Call of Duty is a good example. Let's say that Call of Duty comes around in a couple of years and Xbox can sit there and be like, yeah, it is available everywhere, but here you can play it for $9.99 a month. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Or you get this extra whatever.
Yeah. And it's like, the thing for Sony is their sales will be damaged, even on third party games, right? The sales on their platform will be damaged by that game also being available on Game Pass. And the only way to really absolutely ensure that it's not on Game Pass is pay for exclusivity of the game.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I do think Game Pass will lead to more exclusives in more places. I think that ultimately, as we discuss this Xbox showcase, though, something I am realizing is it's so unknown. Outside of maybe 3 games, We literally don't know what we're going to get.
Well, even then, they're kind of obvious, to be shown off, but we don't actually know that they're gonna be.
Absolutely,
But
yeah.
and that
Absolutely.
kind of is what Xbox is at the minute. There is just we don't know what's going on with them.
And kind of like I was saying earlier, on one hand, that actually makes it super exciting because you don't know what you're gonna get, and because it could be, like, let's imagine that it somehow is that they do actually have every studio show something, and we see Fable, we see Hellblade 2, we see this, that, and the other, and it's like that would be a hell of a year, for them. But then it's that thing of, it could also be one of those years where maybe some of those games aren't ready yet, and we do just end up with Starfield, Forza, Redfall, and a couple of other things. And that wouldn't even be a bad year because Starfield is a massive game. And it's still exciting, right? But it's that thing of, it's exciting because you don't know what you're going to get, but it's also, you go into it with a little bit of trepidation because of that same fact. Because they are so unknown right now, you go into it with, I don't know what I'm going to get, so why should I really be excited? And that's a hard thing for them to get over. And in a way, I wonder whether with something like Starfield, whether they might announce ahead of time that is going to be there. Because sometimes when it's like a massive game that people already know about, they'll be like, yeah, we're going to show this there and make sure you're there. Because I think then it would be like, at least you have because everyone expects Starfield to be there, right? Because it's releasing in November. It probably is still releasing in November, because I think if it was going to be delayed, I feel like we probably would have heard about it.
Yeah, I would imagine there'd be some kind of leak.
And it's just like, I think that they'd be quite smart to just announce maybe something like Starfield being there ahead of time to then get people into the show, because more people are going to tune in if they know for a fact that Starfield is there, right? And then you can hit them with some surprises and stuff.
I think something that would be really cool to do, and they've done it sporadically here and there, like when Phil would tease shit on his shelf.
Yes,
like with these, like, the announcement images and stuff like that. If you have something that is guaranteed to be there, hint at it, tease people, and just tease people. Wait, I spotted this thing.
And the funny thing is, they're super good on, especially with social media marketing, they're super good sometimes of like having a little laugh and a little joke and kind of having a wink to the fans, you know what I mean? And it's like I saw a tweet yesterday that just made me laugh more than anything. And it was the Forza Horizon one in reply to Xbox's tweet where they were like, craft, mine, and stuff like that. And then Forza were like, Horizon, Forbidden West. And I just thought it was really funny. And it's
wait, no, wrong one.
And it's just like, that's cool. Like, their social media teams and their marketing teams understand how to kind of do the light-hearted marketing stuff, and they kind of poke fun at themselves and they have a little laugh. And like you're saying, why not do that with some teases of certain things and just kind of get people excited, because they're not, like we discussed earlier, they're not in the space yet where people know enough for them to get excited on their own. Like, people don't yet know enough about what each of these games are and what is coming and when, that they can know when to expect it. For example, nobody knows if Fable's going to be there, because nobody knows if Fable is a year away or 3 years away.
Like, imagine, like, because like the image they sent out has, it's on like a background where it's like stars and stuff.
Yeah, and that's why people have started to think about the Starfield thing.
Well, not even that. I think Starfield is just a really obvious nailed on one. But like, what if you can connect all those stars and it draws something?
Yeah, that would be
how
really
sick
cool.
would that be? Like, have some fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to end with a little prediction for the show. just because I think it'd be interesting, is what do we think will open the show and what do we think closes the show? And we can go as wild as we want. We can do whatever we like.
I think it'd be smart to open with Starfield again.
I agree with that.
I think that'd be smart. Like, get out there and just be like, yeah, cool. This is the obvious ones.
I was going to say, yeah, get the big one out the way because everybody knows it's the obvious one, right? Yeah. Everyone knows Starfield's the obvious one. So get that one out the way, use that to get people hyped. And then people will be like, okay, well, what are we going to see now? And then you hit with something else, and then you hit with something else.
Just get into a bit where it's like, okay, we know everything about these. Now we're just in completely unknown territory. Now it's just cool shit.
Because I could see them. Because for example, I could see them doing Starfield. Then maybe they immediately do Redfall after that because it's another Bethesda game.
Or maybe they open up with Hellblade and then go in Starfall or something like that. Like, I think that they open up with known stuff that is kind of obvious. I think.
Okay, so
but like they did last time.
But if you were to guess, then at the end of the show, kind of their one more thing, they may not position it as a one more thing.
I think they'll have a one more thing.
But the final thing that they show, what do you think it will be? Just like a nice little prediction. Gets you some bonus.
I think it would be bold points if they were to tease Elder Scrolls, but I imagine it's far too early.
That might be too early. The rumor on that one, just to give a bit of background, I guess, for people, and I don't mind, I'm not under NDA for this one. The report on that one is they've been working on it since September last year. So
definitely too early then.
So they obviously did have some pre-production stuff before that, but the report was September last year because it was after the acquisition.
I'm honestly not sure because I can't make up my mind as if it's like, obviously we're not going to be able to
Fable would be a massive one, right? Fable would be a massive one. And Fable
if there's a release date.
I was going to say Fable being the one more thing works if there's a release date.
Yeah. I'm really not sure because obviously it's meant to be a surprise.
Do you know what I think it might be? And I don't know why. I think it could be one of the rumored things, and I think it's because those rumored things are quite big. For example, if they did the one more thing as the Mando MMO, I think that's quite a big thing. Like Mando's big. Do you know what I mean?
I think kind of, yeah. I think people will be disappointed with it being an MMO.
Yeah.
Because they are, in the grand scheme of, game
there is
MMOs are
actually
kind of niche.
I know what it might be because there was one more rumor that's been floating around very heavily now for quite a few months. Is apparently they do have a Marvel game. And nobody knows what the Marvel game is yet. So imagine if that was their one more thing of like the announcement of this Marvel game.
That'd be cool.
Like that would be cool. And it would also be a thing of they haven't had one yet, right? Like they haven't had their own one yet that is theirs.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Like, yes, Guardians was on Xbox, but it wasn't their game. And therefore that could be quite interesting.
Yeah.
As kind of the one more thing moment as well. Because that also then has the thing of being completely unknown so that it's more of a surprise and also being a meaningful moment.
I'm trying to just wonder what character it could be.
maybe that's also another future video at some point of what Marvel character will Xbox get.
A Blade game would be sick.
Oh, don't even say that, Luke.
A Blade game would be dope. A Blade game. They probably won't now because Platinum are being extremely weird.
Yeah.
But like, imagine a Blade game made by
Platinum.
Like Platinum. That'd be sick.
Jesus.
That'd be sick. Not going to happen because Platinum are being weird and want to do all live servicing nonsense.
So now on to the question, which is where we really end. We do have a question from last week, which I believe Sean's question was, what IP that Embracer have acquired would we like to see come back? Because you mentioned Gex.
Yeah.
And I didn't manage to think of one. Did you manage to think of an IP?
Come back to me.
Okay.
I did have one, but I can't remember what it is.
Because for me, Deus Ex was the one that that was for me. That's the one, right? Like I want that to come back. Tomb Raider I love, but we already know that's coming back.
Yep.
And it's like, yeah, because he wanted to know outside of those three kind of main mentioned ones.
Because obviously, like I answered the prior question with Soul Reaver, and now embrace their own Soul Reaver. So that's
and they've pretty much said they will be bringing it back, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if they could, because we don't know if they, where the rights lie with it. Sleeping Dogs would be mine.
I know Sleeping Dogs is an odd one because I actually heard that Activision own those rights.
That's where it's really just muddy.
So that's a weird. So that's a super weird one there. But if they could, I agree with you because I loved Sleeping Dogs. So we'll
do the other question because I had another one, but I can't remember what it was. I'm just trying to find it. But what your other question was?
So my question is, what is a game that you would like to see Xbox move to another studio? And what I mean by that is an IP that they own. It could be a Bethesda IP that one of their studios works on, or it could be an Xbox owned IP that a newly acquired Bethesda studio works on, right? What IP would you like to see them move to a different studio? Because we have heard about them kind of potentially passing Fallout around between different studios, and I think that's a positive thing for the Fallout franchise. I think nobody wants to wait another 10 years for a Fallout game. So that's a positive thing. And I think that would be just a good question for us to answer next week. I'm not sure if Sean is back yet.
Can I just answer it now?
Oh, go on then.
Because I think I have a tasty one.
Oh, okay. Go on then. What is it, Luke? What have you got? Halo. Where would you move it to?
The obvious answer is id, but I'm not sure I'd do that.
Okay.
Maybe I would.
Well, maybe your question, Luke, is where would you move it to? You've given us the IP.
Yeah.
Now you have to think about where you would move it to.
For sure. I'm still trying to find that other game. I'm still trying to find it because I know, like, I would love for them to do something with Gex because I think Gex can be a fun, kind of platformy, tongue-in-cheek, but more of an adult tongue-in-cheek.
And there's not enough of those these days, right?
There isn't. There absolutely isn't. There's an old weird set of games called Pandemonium, which I think they could do stuff with because they were interesting back in the day. Soul Reaver is the biggest thing for me. I think Soul Reaver
is the one that everybody wants, right?
Yeah, it's just such a rich. It's got such a rich history and rich lore. I think there's a lot you could do with it. Thief could be one.
That could be quite an interesting one, actually.
But I don't. Yeah. That's it did still relatively recently have a game in the last 7 years, I think it was, 2016, I think.
Yeah.
3D Realms. I'm trying to find it because it's bugging me. Because there was definitely one I was like, this would be sick, but I can't think of it.
Fair enough. Well,
it's really annoying me.
I'm gonna give you the game that I would move, but I'm not gonna tell you the studio yet.
Okay.
The Xbox game that I would move is the Gears of War franchise.
Interesting.
And I'll tell you why, and I'll tell you where next week. But I think it could be something super interesting. So
that is an interesting one because
because they're not bad, right?
No, I don't necessarily think they need to move. I think it is just
they need a break.
I'm not even sure it needs a break. I think it really just needed to become more horror when they teased that it was going to be, and we're like,
Well,
actually,
maybe,
no, it's not going to
well,
be.
maybe that would get you thinking as to where I might move it. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm not going to completely move it. Maybe it's that I want two studios to work on the game.
Interesting. Yeah.
Maybe I want a little bit of a partnership.
Yeah.
So and then the other question that is a specific audience question that we won't answer ourselves is, what game are you most looking forward to seeing at the Xbox Bethesda showcase? Is it Starfield? Is it something else? Is it Hellblade 2? Is it Forza Motorsport? Because I know there's still a lot of racing game fans out there.
What is like your wild, if this showed up, you'd lose your shit one?
Ooh.
For the Xbox showcase. Because I feel like that's...
Ooh.
We normally end on that, but we didn't actually touch on that yet.
Oh, wow. Okay. Give me a minute. Have you got one?
I mean, Wolfenstein would do a lot for me, I think, because I really like those games. They're fantastic. Like, they're better than Doom, I believe, because the first Doom was amazing. I don't think the second Doom was all that good. It was fine, but they tried to overcomplicate it and it went weird. But Wolfenstein kept that cadence for me. I think it wouldn't necessarily be like a holy shit moment, but maybe like some kind of addition to Psychonauts would be cool, like some DLC or some extra content of some kind. I mean, I do wonder if Halo actually turns up at all.
I think Halo will turn up in the show. I
think it'd be a touchy one to have because of...
So the reason I think it will turn up in the show is because they've just launched season 2, and I think they may want to talk about future plans. They may give a little peek at what the Forge is going to look like, for example, which is coming at the start of season 3. Because they're not going to have another showcase that we know of before that comes.
Yeah.
For me, my holy shit moment would be something like, and I don't know anything, just to be clear. Again, I know nothing about what is in this showcase.
Of course.
But as a gamer, I would love it. And this is actually something I think is kind of would be a massive moment for a lot of people. And that is, and I think it's the one third-party game they could end on as potentially their one more thing if they had some sort of deal around it, like it coming day one to Game Pass or it being a timed exclusive. And that would be something like a brand new Splinter Cell game.
Oh, big time. Yeah, big time. I would love, and it's not going to happen because the studio are super busy doing a lot of other things.
Go on.
Prey 2.
I have thought of another one, actually.
Prey was sick. I love Prey.
And this is more for me just because I like the designer. I want to see what Shinji Mikami's game is, because we know his studio.
Is that the Slitterhead one? Is it that one?
No. So no, because I can't remember the guy you're thinking of. So obviously his studio Tango Gameworks just did Ghostwire Tokyo, right? But his development team, his team was not the team that made that game. And therefore, I'm assuming they had a second game in the works at that studio.
Oh, no, that's Toyama I'm thinking of.
And I think that Shinji Mikami obviously worked on Resident Evil 4, beloved horror game director. I also think Xbox could just do with a horror game. Like, they, it's something that's kind of missing.
Well, Kojima?
Yeah, that would be the other one. If they got the...
I'd kill for Kojima to actually do a horror game.
If they got the announcement of whatever their Kojima game is and it was a horror game, I think people would lose their shit.
Could Shinji's game be just another Evil Within?
Potentially.
What was that? There was a game that was meant to be Evil Within 3 and they pivoted it, didn't it? I forgot
Yeah, I
what it
can't
is.
remember what it was, but yes, they did pivot it. But you could be right. They could just do another Evil Within. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think there's a lot of this is the thing. They've got a lot of potential for holy shit moments. For example, do you know what? Me as a gamer, and this is genuinely me as a gamer, a holy shit moment for me, and it again connects to Ubisoft because I play a lot of Ubisoft games, isn't even about a game. If they literally announce
Ghostwire. Ghostwire
yeah,
was meant to be Evil Within 3.
and if they were to announce something like, we know that Ubisoft Plus is coming to Game Pass, if they like is coming to Xbox, if they announced that they were integrating it with Game Pass,
That'd be cool. Yeah.
And it was kind of, that would be a big moment for me personally. I know it wouldn't hit a lot of people in the same kind of
that would be very
way,
cool.
but
Because
actually,
I've got the issue with Ubisoft where I want to play their games, but I just never get round to them because they all look the same, and I feel like
I can understand that. I've heard that from a lot of people for sure. And yeah, as someone who obviously, I did work for Ubisoft, but as a gamer, I do play the vast majority of their games. I enjoy Ubisoft games. I have for years. That's not me saying it just because I work there. Anyone can look at my gaming history. Like, I've been playing for a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, you're a massive fan of Assassin's Creed.
Yeah. So, I bought the original Xbox to play Splinter Cell when it was a timed exclusive. So there you go. So yeah, no, for me, that would actually be a kind of small holy shit moment of, oh, that's actually great. We now have an even more valuable Game Pass.
Yeah. I mean, Splinter Cell would blow all of that out of the water for me as well.
Of course.
Like, we've talked about that for so long.
Yeah,
so long.
Of course.
I like that. It's been heavily rumored that Ubisoft are either going to get bought out or
I mean, the report most recently, I guess we'll just comment on it because it is in the news.
Or something.
Most recently, there was a report that they're looking at an investor of some kind to try and help them stop a takeover.
Yeah, this is one where I hope the takeover happens.
A lot of people say that.
I honestly think it will. I honestly think it will this time.
It'll be interesting to see. I mean, they fought off Vivendi before, so obviously keep your eyes on them and see what happens.
This is different. I think a change of ownership and change of leadership at Ubisoft would do the world of good. Sure.
So there's that little bit of news for you if you missed that. But yeah, this Xbox showcase is going to be a really interesting one. I think that it's a really important one for Xbox.
Big time.
And I think that if I could give them one piece of advice, if anyone from Xbox is listening, and I know a couple of you do, just don't be afraid. Just like
yeah, this is time to puff out your chest and just be like, yeah, this is what we're doing.
Yeah, because it's like, if you're confident in what you've got, that explains why you talk the way you do about things.
Yeah.
But you need to show people, and then they'll be like, 100%. Okay, now I understand why you're confident. Now I get why you're confident, because you are actually fulfilling the things that you're saying.
Yeah.
But people aren't going to believe you until you start showing that stuff. And I understand the trepidation around not wanting to show something too early, because you have been burnt in the past by doing that, with kind of cancelled projects and other stuff.
But that's going to happen regardless.
But that's okay. Like, people understand that happens. And it's kind of like we were saying earlier. If Hellblade 2 is going to be released next year, show us it. If Avowed is coming next year, show us the game.
Yeah.
Like,
this should be your next 18 months of what's going on.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes one thing that you do very well at Xbox is you focus on the here and now, and you focus on what is coming at that moment in time, and you make a really kind of big moment about it, right? But you struggle to then hold people's retention and attention of people over the next 6 months, because nobody knows w's coming.
And
people want to know, like, if take a leaf out of Sony's book, right? Sony have been criticized in the past for showing games too early, which I think you could argue they've done. But the reason that they've done it is because then at least people know what's coming. And if people know what's coming and when it's coming, even just that starts to get a little bit more faith.
Yeah.
Like, people don't even have to always see things. Sometimes just dates help.
Yeah.
Sometimes just do the Marvel calendar thing. Do the Marvel calendar thing if you want to. Even that would work.
Yeah. One final thing I think would be extremely huge if they were able to announce it.
Go on then.
Is the family plan.
Yes, there's been a lot of rumors about that. I forgot that one.
That would be massive if they could announce that. Because
and also if they announced that was, because obviously the report was that was potentially launching later this year, the family plan. And if they launched that around the time of a release of a big game, so like,
that'd be smart. Yeah. Whatever their big, like, not. I guess it depends.
They'd probably do it on Forza, right? Because they wouldn't do it on Starfield.
Yeah, so that's what I was thinking.
They do it on whichever big one was first, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
So whichever one was first, and we're expecting Forza Motorsport to be before Starfield.
And if not, it might even be now go. It's it's available now.
Maybe that ties into the Redfall thing. Imagine if they were like, family plan. And here's Redfall, that is a 4-player co-op game, because we know it is. go and play it with your, And it's like, I think that family plan for Game Pass, as a little point on it, because you mentioned it, also brings them closer to what they actually wanted to do years ago, which was kind of allowing families and potentially a bigger group of friends to share a library of games. And Game Pass with the family plan is a way to do that. Yeah,
and it will put a bit of a fire under Sony's ass, because then they're the only ones that don't have a family plan.
Absolutely.
I mean, they're the only ones that don't currently. Well, they do have a subscription.
I mean, Nintendo's family plan is amazing. So just do that. Bonkers. Just do that.
8 people, right? 8 people. That's nuts.
Yeah. Nuts. So there's a lot to look forward to. We will, of course, be covering the Xbox Bethesda showcase. Whether we do it, we won't be doing a live stream, but we may, depending on how we do it, we may decide to record our reactions as we're watching, or we may kind of do a post-show reaction style thing. But you will get something probably the day after, or potentially hours after, depending on how quick we can be. Yeah, and what time it actually is. Because it's probably going to be late. So for us, it's 6 p.m. UK. So really? It's 6 p.m. Oh, that's UK. Nice. Yes. That's good. Which is really nice. So 6 p.m. UK time on the 12th of June. God, that's Xbox early in America then, isn't it? I think it's 1 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific time. A lot of people are going to miss it. They're going to be at work. Absolutely. But then it is on a Sunday. Okay. Fair enough. It is on a Sunday, yeah. So that's very exciting, I think. And as I said before, it needs to be a big one for Xbox. They like Starfield's great, Forza Motorsport's great, Redfall could be really interesting. Mm-hmm. But hit us with some of the other big boys as well. Yeah, this should be the beginning of them striding. This should be like they're whereas, like I said, right? If you lay out 2023, at least then people have a reason to be excited going into the next year. Yeah, or at the very least, lay out the next year. And then you can do the second half of 2023 and beyond next year. Absolutely, absolutely. So I guess my final thing is the one biggest thing I hope they fix, and I hope that this showcase is the start of that, is please don't leave the start of the year bare again. Like, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I like the day one games on Game Pass, and I think they do well to get things like MLB, and last year they had Outriders as well early in the year, and it does somewhat fill that gap. But if you can just give one big first-party game in that first 6 months, that's going to be enough for people. Like, they don't need 3 games. You know, it's just space your stuff out a little bit better, and
Absolutely.
I think things would work out well for you.
100%.
So exciting times. We will obviously be here to cover it all. So follow us at G4A Network. We are now on Twitter, at Eat Sleep Game as well. Obviously, subscribe to Eat Sleep Game on YouTube if you're listening on Spotify, because our Spotify is the usual place. Just search Game for All, because we are technically still called Game for All. We just shorten it for purposes. And yeah, jump over and check out Jeff's review once again. You know, he's got a Trek to Yomi review on analogstickgaming.com, and some other great reviews. I know he's got some really interesting ones coming up as well. So please go and check him out.
Yeah, check out on the channel as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one other announcement is very soon you will get some content from the G4A network that is not video games. So watch out for that on our Twitter. We will share when that releases and where it is releasing. And with that being said, this has been episode 97, and we will see you next week. I believe both me and Luke will be here. And whether Sean is or not, who knows? We'll see what happens, but you will get a show next week. This we're kind of running along a broken track at the moment, but
everyone's very busy. Busy.
Things happen in life, and don't worry, we will keep bringing you episodes when we can, and it will be at least once a week. They just may not always release on the same day. So we will see you next time, and goodbye.